My name is Simone de Roches. I'm a postdoc in Erica Bree Rosenblum's lab at the University of California, Berkeley. I finished my PhD last year at the University of Idaho, and my dissertation was on the lizards of white sands and their evolution and ecology. I've done a few research projects down here at White Sands on the local lizards. First of all, I started looking at their evolution and ecology, and in particular, I was looking at how the lizards in White Sands differ from their counterparts in the dark soils surrounding environment. So I looked at what they were eating, where they were perching differently, what their habitat was like, how that was different, how they ran differently. And then recently I've started a mark recapture project to examine ongoing natural selection on these lizards on 2 of the 3 species at White Sands. My research basically looked at the other aspects that were different between the white sands and the dark soils lizards. For example, how their morphology or their body shape was different between the white sands and the dark soils environment. White sands lizards tend to eat harder prey and bigger prey than their dark soils counterparts. We also find that the density of lizards in white sands compared to the same species outside white sands is a lot higher. So the lizards are doing really, really well. And finally, the lizards here are occupying a wider ecological niche. So what I mean by that is they're using more of the available resources, more of the available perches, and really taking advantage of all the habitat for them without their other competitors that they have outside white sands. So part of the reason why we think the lizards are doing so well on white sands and why their population numbers are so high and why they're using so many resources is because there are only 3 species on white sands, 3 species of lizards, and there are up to 48 different species of reptiles outside white sands. And these other species are competitors with the lizards, they're predators on the lizards, so really you've got this absence of selection on white sands in many ways. So one of the really special things about white sands is that it is so young and so unique. And it really tells us about the beginning stages of community assembly when an ecosystem or habitat first forms. So we see only a few species have managed to get here. We see that these species are doing very well, and their ecology and evolution is very different from their counterparts outside white sands. So that really teaches us a lot about evolution. It's a really simplified system ecologically as well. You have a shorter food web or food chain, you have fewer species overall, and really that tells us a lot about how we can use this simple system to tell us about more complex systems. I hope that a lot of people will benefit from our research here on the lizards at White Sands. For the academic community, we learn a lot about evolution, and we learned how fast evolution can occur and how it can occur just in a few thousand years to make actual notable differences in morphology of these lizards. The other thing that I hope is that White Sands, because it's such a dynamic environment and such a changing environment, it can tell us how very quick changes can affect the evolution of these species. So the dunes are moving every year, and the dunes are changing all the time, and the availability of vegetation and insects for the lizards to eat, that changes so rapidly. And with our research, we can hope to see whether the lizards are actually changing with their environment as well, and how fast that can actually happen. Some people think of white sands as little more than just a huge sandbox, but really it's more like a laboratory and an experiment that evolution has given us. Basically, we have 3 species of lizards that have colonized white sands, and they've all colonized independently and all independently evolved very similar phenotype in terms of their white coloration. So it's kind of like this natural experiment that we have access to as biologists,